Well, Anthony, this is a real treat for me to be able to interview my director of 15 years when I was in the company. But you came to do Swan Lake after only being a director a year. Why was it Swan Lake that you wanted to reproduce?
I thought it's probably, although it's jumping into the deep end, a good way to work with the dancers that I was now in charge of.
Yes.
And I think Swan Lake had been, well, it's always in the repertoire of a company, but it was the one that perhaps needed a rethink because it had been sort of jiggled around a bit musically and everything. Things have changed, music's changed, storyline has changed, and I want to look back and get as close to the successful original production in 1895. One of the key points about this production was the designer, inspired designs by Jolanda Sonnebend, who I feel gave it a nudge. It's not the traditional medieval fairy tale look, which I thought I would do. But I went to meet with her and she said, "Oh, Anthony, I'm playing the music all the time, I'm thinking of it." And she said, "I just feel strongly I have to set it in the time of Tchaikovsky in the 1800s. So that's how the period came about in Russia. And in the ballroom act, she said that in Russia in those days, costume parties, fancy dress balls, were very popular. So that's why everyone has masks and rather fabulous costumes."
Yeah, I read that it was inspired by Fabergé.
I mean, Yolanda's has a sort of rampant imagination. Every time I went to her studio, something else in the model would be there. And one day I came in and for Act 2 there was an egg on the stage. And I thought we're going a bit too far here. But there is a symbolism of the mirrors and the front
the
cloth.
shape of them.
And of course, it's the period when, Mr. Fabergé was
Very
making
strong
all
designer.
these wonderful things for the royal family,
What I remember vividly being the lady-in-waiting for the Queen in Act 3, watching the premiere principal couple, which was Cynthia Harvey, with Jonathan Cope, who was one of my main partners through my career, and watching her do Black Swan was just spectacular. Why did you choose her?
Before I became director, I had done what I call an experimental exile with joining American Ballet Theatre.
Yes.
And Cynthia was an up-and-coming dancer at ABT. She had the energy and dynamics of an American dancer, but she had the purity of the English school, as it's called, of training. And I thought this would fit in really well. She was dancing with a young and upcoming dancer who'd come through the Royal Ballet School, Jonathan Cope. So it was an ideal match.
Well, for me as a student, and to watch them and realise that they were from two different schools, you would never have known.
No.
They were perfect together. So I was so lucky because that was my first 3-act classic as a principal.
Oh, right.
At the age of 20. So when I first did it, you gave me the opportunity to be coached by Margot Fontaine.
Oh, right.
So I got, I think, 2 days with her. It was a long time ago.
Yes.
So I think it was 1990. And I think I had to learn it very fast for my first show. And so, it's such a large role and so much to it. And I just thought she was going to drill me with a technique. But of course, it was all about every step is telling the story.
I always find, or I've heard from other ballerinas, that it's very rare that when the performance is finished, that you feel you've achieved success in both the white act, Odette, and the black act. You either one wins out, and it's rare that you feel that you've achieved an interpretation that pleases you in both roles in one performance. Was that always the case?
I think always the case. I don't think I was ever satisfied.
No.
But I think because there is so much material for the ballerina, if you think when it was first created, it was created on 2 ballerinas.
Yes.
So and you can totally understand why.
Yes.
Because it is so much for you to absorb, but also to be 2 different personalities, you know. But I mean, incredibly challenging. And I think only maybe after 10 years of performing it did I actually feel that I was stronger in the white act than the black.
I think the white is the hardest,
I think
actually.
Without doubt
there are more obvious emotions in the black act, aren't they? To be a seductress and powerful or whatever.
Yes.
But the white...
The nature of the steps as well.
Yes, has to be so vulnerable and... Yes.
It's very hard to be vulnerable but still strong technically.
The classics are still, even the dancers they will say, they're still so exposing. You know, and the audience, they know the set pieces, of course, and they have the imagery of what should be done. And in the solo variations, you'll find that a step is repeated in Sleeping Beauty 4 times.
Always, yes.
So you can do it well once, but it might, you have a crumble the second time, you know.
Swan Lake in itself is the cleanest and purest of that style. You know, there's no affectations. You know, Margot always said, don't try and be the swan, you're always the woman.
Oh,
and
really?
I thought, how wonderful, because, you know, you're trying to do all this quivering and all this. And she said, no, you are a woman first. You're always a woman first. And I was like, oh, great, thank you for that, you know.
My crusade as a director was to make the male dancers in the company look as natural as possible, because I used to have the cringe factor, which is when the wife drags the husband screaming to the ballet, you know. And I sit there thinking, well, that's why they don't like it. They're looking at that. I can see that. So that was it was to make it real and look natural for a man to dance.
After 28 years, you've come in and you're staging this Swan Lake, but it must be incredibly rewarding now.
When it goes well. But I sit out front, you know, sometimes like this.
Still the perfectionist.
Well, it's because as a dancer, if things go wrong, you're in control of it.
Yes.
But as a producer of a production,
that's why
I can't stop and say, no, like a film director, and get it perfect. It's live theatre. That's what's exciting about live theatre, but sometimes things go wrong.
Yeah. Everybody's on the edge of their seat.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
Pleasure.